What's happening, Hot Wheelers? Joe Motor back with you here, and I thought today we would talk some about the Team Transport releases from Hot Wheels Car Culture. I know it's been a popular item recently online and in stores. We've seen a lot of it lately, but I just wanted to share a few thoughts about this series. I actually didn't think I'd be able to find any in stores based on their anticipated popularity, but I actually did find a couple of pieces, including this one here, the BRE Datsun 510 Bluebird and racing livery, the blue and white, and I really love the white wheels on this piece. Really nice touch, and the clean blue and white is really nice. It is based on a real race car. It just doesn't have the full authentic livery all the way around it. In fact, Greenlight is going to release a version of this car very soon. They're going to release a ton of versions actually, but this car in particular should have a little bit more of the licensed livery on it. But this is a nice sort of gesture by Hot Wheels, and it's nice to have another variation of the casting and racing livery to add to the other two that we're very familiar with. Of course, the Rlc Car Culture release that came out in 2018, the number 35, which is also not really an official, doesn't have all the authentic livery on it, but it is based on a real race car. And then, of course, the original, the one that started it all, the John Morton BRE Datsun from the Vintage Racing series, which, you know, some of you are probably sick of hearing about at this point, but this car is really important because I think it all goes back to this car. It seems like this car is responsible for almost the entire JDM craze in the diecast world. What's interesting is that I remember collectors who were collecting back in 2010, and unfortunately I was not. I kicked myself all the time for not being a peg hunter back then because these were hanging around on the pegs, and a lot of the collectors say that this was a peg warmer, and I can't even imagine having 3 or 4 of these hanging on the pegs when just a few years later this becomes one of the most desired cars in Hot Wheels history. So it certainly has its own legendary history in the racing world, but it also has quite an interesting history in the diecast world. And you know, I think this car is pretty much what spawned the entire craze of JDM, not just in Hot Wheels, but it's why Greenlight and M2 and Tomica became really popular again, and even Jada and some of the other brands came on board with their own JDM releases. So this car in particular has quite a history, but what's interesting is that this was a peg warmer for a while and then became a very desirable car. But this piece here, which was anticipated to be a very popular release by Hot Wheels, and because of the JDM craze, they thought, well, we better put 2 of these in each case because there's going to be a huge demand for this particular piece. And I think a lot of people snatched them up, but they released so many of them that I'm actually seeing these as peg warmers now, which is kind of unbelievable. But every time I go into a store and check to see if any new Team Transports are on the pegs, I see quite a few of these BRE Datsun Team Transports still sitting on the pegs. So I don't know, our hobby is pretty interesting when it comes to supply and demand, and we're pretty fickle when it comes to that. And it's funny because the piece back here, which I'll talk about in a minute, was the one that came 1 per case, and it was actually seemed to be the more desirable car, even though it got released again in a subsequent assortment. But this car in particular still sitting around on some of the pegs, so you still have a chance to get it. And one of the things I've noticed about these subsequent car culture releases, especially the BRE Datsun, because it's very easy to compare them, is that if you look at the original John Morton version of this car and you look up close at the tampo work and the graphics, it's really remarkable. The clarity and the sharpness of the tampo work here and the way it blends in with the paint is really beautiful, and it really is what I think makes this car even more special, is because the tampo work here was a process that Hot Wheels was using in 2010 or so, whenever they were manufacturing these, that is super silky smooth. And even though the car has some gloss to the paint, the tampo work just blends in beautifully, and it is very nice, clear and sharp. Now if you look at the RLC release, you'll notice that the tampo, the color, and also the lettering just seems a little bit thicker, a little bit smudgier, not quite as sharp. It looks like there's a little more bleed in the ink. And if you look at the 3 and the 5 really close, you start to notice that the edges are not sharp at all. In fact, you see a little bit of bleed over and some fuzziness to the numbers, which really, in terms of us collectors that love our detail, is kind of disappointing. You'll also notice that it's a lot glossier all the way around. It blends with the paint, but it just seems to be a lot more candy glossy. And I don't know if this is, I'm sure it's more economical for Hot Wheels. I don't know if it's longer lasting, because I've noticed on my John Morton up top here, the Morton lettering has started to smudge off. So I don't know if this tampo here, this process, maybe it was nicer, but maybe it didn't last as long. I'm not really sure. Maybe somebody out there knows the reason, but it certainly seems like the quality of the tampo work in terms of the clarity of the graphics just is not the same as it used to be. And you notice it too on the number 68 here, even though it's harder to tell just because it's just the two-tone color. But the closer you get and the more you look, you sort of notice that the edges are not quite as sharp on the graphics on the later releases as they were on the original. So I don't know what's going on there, but from a distance it doesn't make that much of a difference, I guess. It's just when you get up close. But a lot of us collectors love those up close details. In fact, if you look, just one more thing here, if you look at the trim around the edges of this number 68, you'll notice the smudgy paint, which just is not quality detail there. In fact, they could have just left the black off, maybe just put some kind of accent somewhere else, but I don't know. It's a little frustrating, but again, from a distance it doesn't really matter. But let's take a look at the transports here, since that's what we're talking about. This one here, the Fleet Flyer, which goes along with the BRE Datsuns, and what's cool is you can kind of put the whole fleet with the Fleet Flyer, and any one of them fits with it, so that's pretty cool. And the Fleet Flyer's got a really big hauler box here in the back. It actually goes over the top of the cab. But I really enjoy the castings of these haulers. They're really interesting, and I hope that they release them in some different ways, because I think we could actually see an interesting truck series from Hot Wheels using these castings. They really are a nice complement to the car. The other one that I picked up here is, of course, the Nissan Skyline, the 2000 GTX. And this is another popular release, of course. Brands like Kyosho and Greenlight and even M2 have versions of this car. We probably remember the Japan Historics release of this car a couple of years ago, maybe now, in the kind of off-white and blue, and it's got the blue base. And this one has the red base with the red wheels, but very nice, really clean white and red tampo work, and the tampos look really good actually on this particular car. So really enjoy this piece with the red headlights. And then the hauler that goes with this one is, of course, the Sakura Sprinter, which is nice because you can see the whole cab. The hauler portion of it doesn't actually extend over the cab, it's sort of separate. So it's nice to be able to see the full cab here, and it is really a cool casting. And I know you guys have seen a lot of these online, so I'm trying not to dwell too much here, but they really do have nice detail, and it's a really nice chunky metal casting with all metal base and rubber tires. So it's a very substantial collector item. Of course, the hauler itself, the box back here, is plastic, even though it opens up. I still have the plastic inside there. I never took that out. But it's very functional and playable, and I think these are a fantastic idea. And if you've looked at the card art, I know it's been talked about quite a bit. I have a couple of these carded actually. The card art on these is spectacular, and it goes really well with the packaging. Same thing goes for the Nissan here. I'll show you that really quick just in case. Card art is just incredible. Look at that. Beautiful stuff there. And luckily I have a couple of these in the package. I don't know if I'm going to keep them, but I bought a case of these, so I was able to crack a couple of them and start looking at them up close. And then the most recent release that I have here is the Nissan Fairlady Z, which also comes with the Sakura Sprinter. And I'm really excited about this one. We're going to actually crack this one open. But look at that card art. It's just beautiful and really spectacular work. So I really think you know, the team transport is a good idea. Let's go ahead and crack this open. All right, there she sits. Let me pull this down just a little bit, and that way we can set her on the platform here. Very excited about this Nissan Fairlady. Really excited because I know there are wheel variations to this piece, and I've got the all blacked out version, which I'm really excited. I actually ordered this online. I didn't find it in the store, so I was really hoping to get the black version of this wheel, because I think it also comes in a gray variation. So keep your eye out for the wheel variations. I don't know which one is more rare, but this is also based on an actual race car. I don't think it, based on what Lamley said, I don't think it actually ever raced. It might have been a test car, but you can look it up online and find pictures of the actual car. But look at those beautiful tail lights right there. Very nice. And I really love this sort of strange blue kind of swab of blue paint here that sort of looks like a tiger. And then the GTS2 and the number 23 there, the red, white, and blue, the white stripe down the front, and the blue trim around the headlights is especially interesting. So I'm pretty impressed with this. And again, I mean, if you look up close, you can sort of see the fuzziness of the tampo. It's really hyper glossy. And not quite as sharp, so it's, you know, they're definitely using a different process than they used to, but I'm still really happy about the release of this particular car. Some other details there on the hood. Can't go wrong with a Fairlady, and I'm glad to add that to the collection here. And then the hauler for that, again, the Sakura Sprinter, now in white with a blue stripe on the side, but still very similar details with metal base, and the red hauler here with the vintage Nissan graphic. Again, very beautiful work all the way around. So I really have good things to say about this. The card art is great, the idea is great, and they become very wonderful sort of substantial collector pieces, and really happy to add these to the collection. So a couple of issues I have with this series. The first one is that for me, as a collector of vintage race cars primarily, I'm looking for the cars that I can put in my display case. So if you're familiar with my channel, I've got my display cases back here, and the cars I collect go in them. I'm a loose collector. I crack them open and I put them in the case. So I definitely wanted to get a couple of these Team Transport releases because the cars are really cool. Had you given me the choice, however, just to buy the car by itself or the car with the hauler, I probably would have just bought the car by itself. Even though I think this is a really cool idea, I really don't have room in my collection for all of these trucks. And I've talked about this too on some of the Greenlight releases that are coming with the ramp trucks. I'm not really interested in those ramp trucks, and even though these are really cool releases, I love these trucks, and the graphics on these are amazing, ultimately what you end up with is a big plastic box on the back of a really cool casting. And I don't have room for these in the display case. Also, you have to kind of spend 12 to 15 to 20 bucks sometimes, depending on which one you're after, just to get the car that you want. That is, if you're after the car. And I know I've seen a few unfortunate circumstances where people will buy the full-on Teams Transport and then return it only to put a mainline car in place of the premium release, which kind of tells me that other people too are just after the car as opposed to the transporter and the car, largely due to the expense and the size of them. So I'd love to hear what you guys think. Are you collecting these with enthusiasm as much as you're collecting the car, or are you kind of just buying these because they're new and interesting and you're really kind of after the car, which is what I'm after? Now, if you play with your cars, that's a whole different story because they have incredible playability. So if you have your own little race here, and then after the race, the car goes into the transporter here, and then you close it up and the transporter takes it off to its next race, that's pretty cool. So if you play with the cars and you're really engaged with the moving parts and the playability of these, I totally get it. These are really awesome. But in terms of display, if you were to put the car inside of the hauler and shut it down and compact it all together, well, you can't see the car anymore. And so you have to kind of keep the car outside of it, maybe side by side like it is on the card art. You could also put it on top, I guess, if you really need to save space. I guess that's not so bad, but it doesn't really seem like that would happen in real life, if that matters. But I think these box haulers here also present this problem that if you're going to put the car in the hauler, the car disappears. It's one of the reasons I think the vintage open trailer hauler is actually a more successful version of this, because once you put the car on the hauler, you can still see it. And it displays really well together with the integrated graphics. I just love this 66 Nova Gasser in flat black and the black hole graphics. What a cool idea. Really mean looking. Love this thing. And the blacked out Goodyear tire here in the back. Super cool. Very simple graphics in sort of a silvery tampo here. The rear end also has some nice tampo work with the red taillights. Now if you look up close, you'll also see a little bit of that smudginess we talked about. So the tampo work just isn't as crisp as it used to be. But from a distance it's not so bad, and when you put it on the hauler, and it's got this lovely little notch on the back there to keep it in place, you can display them together and see them both at the same time. And I think that's really successful, and I kind of wonder what you guys think in terms of display, if you really enjoy these open trailer haulers a little bit more, because you can see everything even though it's still functioning as it's supposed to. And while we've got it here, let's take a look at the vintage hauler here. I can't remember what it's called. You'll have to remind me in the comments, but I just love that front end of this piece. The snake and mongoose also come in this particular hauler, and I don't think it's actually true to what the actual haulers looked like, but it's still a really interesting casting. Really like the detail on the taillights here. There we go. Got the black hole there on the license plate, and the nice texture. This is a plastic top on the back of this hauler here, but still the nice diamond pattern detail there. Little compartments here on the side. The deep dish Real Rider tires are beautiful, and again with the black hole graphics here on the side. Just a mean looking truck. It's really beautiful. I just hope they release this truck in some different formats, because I really think they could utilize these castings in a different way. The popularity of the Greenlight HD trucks, for example, the popularity of the M2 trucks and the big tow trucks, I think Hot Wheels could really do something with these big truck castings and do some variations that I think would be very popular, and would not necessarily be these huge haulers, but maybe some more utility type vehicles that would be very collectible. But I have to say, this is definitely one of my favorite Team Transport releases here, and this one actually became one of the more desirable castings because it was only one per case when it was first released. So I think it's been released again in a subsequent assortment of Team Transports, but man, that is beautiful, and it's hard not to display these two together, even though I'm eventually going to take this away and put it in its own display compartment in my case. But man, that's a beautiful set right there. And overall, I have to say the Team Transport releases is a really fantastic idea, and those of you that are collecting them and enjoying them, just keep on motoring with them, because I do think they're really cool releases and something that adds some originality and some freshness to the Hot Wheels collecting hobby. And just not sure how many more of these I can afford to put in the collection, especially since they're mostly going to be in storage. But would love to hear your thoughts on the Team Transport releases. Are you collecting all of them? Are you storing the trucks? Are you ending up not collecting all of them because they're too expensive? Would love to hear your thoughts on them. What do you think the future of this series is? Is it going to last for a long time? Are you going to fill up a display case with these guys? Let me know. In the meantime, keep on motoring. I'll be back with another video soon. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.